Wildlife.
Hello, welcome to the Wild Review. I'm the Wild Reviewer, and welcome, everybody. Welcome to the final installment of Lost and Found. Yes, I mean it. This one's the last one. Why is it getting dark? It's because of you. That light, Mr. Light. Yeah. I mentioned it last week, but today I won't be going over a specific show. Instead, I will be rating all the shows that I have covered. I've covered about 10 different shows, part of the Lost and Found series, and now I'm going to give them rating spots. Basically giving an overview of what shows I really enjoyed covering and shows I thought were a really good idea and should be remembered by more people than how they're remembered by. And then the shows that, weren't as great. I'll say right now, there were no shows that I thought were horrible nor awful. I wouldn't say they're the worst things out there on television, because there are far more worse things than Planet Sheen and Crash and Bernstein and Annoying Orange, and well, that kind of gives away what's at the bottom of the list. Good job, mate. So the way this will work is I'm going to start from 10 and work my way all the way to 1. 10 is going to represent my least favorite show I've touched upon that I don't think was a very good idea to put on television, and 1 is obviously going to be the best thing that I think was the best thing that I covered on Lost and Found. Not only that, but also some of the coolest stuff that I've seen on television that I think is purely underrated. Now, before we start, I would like to say this is going to be a little different than my usual ratings or favorite list videos that I've done. I've done 2 previously, one of them being my top 10 favorite Lab Rat episodes, and another one, which I recently did last season, my top 5 favorite movies. Unlike those 2 videos, I will not be going into detail about each show and the reasons. Well, I'll give the reasons why they're at their specific spot, but I'm not going to spend that much time on explaining why. I'm probably going to end up contradicting myself and end up going into a little summary of why and give a little overview and review of what exactly I discussed about this show. But I'm going to try to avoid not doing that because I've already technically done all that. I went into perfectly good detail about each one of these shows in their own specific video, which you can definitely check out in its own playlist on my channel. If I can, I will put a link to it at the bottom. With all that said, let's start the ratings countdown. Yay! Number 10. Planet Sheen. I had to think real hard what was going to be in the 10th spot on this list, and the only one that came to mind was Planet Sheen. Like, I know Annoying Orange and Crash and Bernstein aren't fan favorites, but I think out of all those, Planet Sheen is just like the worst one out of all of them. Now, I don't hate this show, because if I hated it, I wouldn't have watched so many episodes of it, but this just wasn't a good idea. I love Sheen. I loved him in Jimmy Neutron. I thought he was the funniest character on that show, or at least one of the funniest characters. So for him to have his own spin-off show, if he was the same as he was in Jimmy Neutron, maybe it would have worked. But because everything of his is just so more pitched up between his voice and the way that he annoys people and his intelligence being really being considered a stupid character. I said it in the main video, he's the comic relief of Jimmy Neutron, so it's very hard for a comic relief to have his own show when he's the comic relief. The whole point of the character trait of a comic relief is to lighten up the crowd and be goofy and make people laugh. When you give a comic relief character a situation that's supposed to kind of be taken seriously, but he's also put in mortal danger, and he doesn't exactly know how to fight, and all he knows how to do is be an idiot, that doesn't really work very well. I think it's great they did a Jimmy Neutron spin-off. The show definitely deserves one. I just think maybe they chose the wrong character for it. I said it before, I think Carl would have made a really great character in this show if he was the one that was trapped on the planet. And the only reason I said that is because we could probably see some really good character development with Carl. In Jimmy Neutron, he's a wimp, he's a mama's boy, he's scared of everything, but I think maybe if he was put on this planet, had to face a bunch of different threats like Jimmy would every day on his show, I think it would have definitely improved his character from being a mama's boy to definitely being a warrior. That's definitely a show I would have seen. It could be both funny, stupid, while also very intense and a bit dark at times, like Jimmy Neutron came off. Okay, Jimmy Neutron didn't come off as dark, but you kind of get the picture. This show could have been like the next Avatar on Nickelodeon. But instead, we got the comic relief of Jimmy Neutron stuck on a planet with a talking monkey, and he just screams a lot. And he brought a burrito to life. That's interesting. So for that, Planet Sheen's at number 10. Number 9. Crash and Bernstein. I've never exactly seen a Disney sitcom or any sort of sitcom that comes to mind that deals with human characters and a puppet. That's the only reason why. I just thought the whole puppet aspect of the show was pretty interesting. That's why it caught my eye and I wanted to watch it. Unfortunately, I gave this show too much credit because I thought it was going to be pretty cool, and in the end, it just became this. I will admit that the show isn't as annoying like Planet Sheen, but it can definitely be interesting. Unlike a lot of characters, Crash isn't really developed as much. He only has one characteristic of him. He likes to destroy things and be very violent and cause a lot of trouble. Also, I still can't get over that pilot. The fact that all the sisters wanted to get rid of Crash because he's making them unhappy, it's like, how horrible of sisters are you? I'm speaking as like, you know, the characters in the show, not actual people, but just like think about it. The girls want to get rid of the one thing that is making their brother happy. These girls brought their brother to a girly doll shop for his birthday. What? Does the child not deserve happiness? Obviously not, because you want to get rid of what he considers to be his best friend. I think the one thing Disney XD was trying to do is create a mascot for themselves, because Nickelodeon has SpongeBob, and while it's not official, I guess you can consider Adventure Time at the time to be the main staple show of the network, and maybe have Jake or Finn as the mascot of the channel. But I think they were definitely trying to do more with Crash on Disney XD. That's why I think they were trying to push the spin-off show they wanted to do with him going to military school. Also, the whole Pranksgiving thing that they would do every year, and Crash would be the main guy involved with it. I think they were trying to do more with Crash, but it just didn't work out very well. Also, the show wasn't funny. I didn't find that much humor in it. A few things were interesting, but not a lot. And for that, it's at number 9. Number 8. Annoying Orange. Now, I was going to put this show at number 10, but I didn't really want to because I actually kind of have a little soft spot for the show. Don't get me wrong, it's not as funny as I thought it would be, and also compared to every other Cartoon Network show on, I don't think it stands a chance being a hit whatsoever. I'm not saying that the crew on this show did bad, it's not much of a fan favorite. It's one of those things that they definitely want to forget ever happened on Cartoon Network because of its great reputation it has at the moment. But the one thing that definitely stuck out about Annoying Orange is, to my knowledge at least, it's the only thing that went from the internet to television and remained there for a while. I mean, I want you to think about this. Fred had a TV show that bombed after the first season. And yes, he had 3 movies, but those bombed as well, and they were only being made because Nickelodeon was making money off of Crookshank. Smosh made a movie that bombed. The Fine Brothers had 2 TV shows, one of them on Nickelodeon, the other one on True TV, and they both got canceled. Annoying Orange is the only internet personality I know that has gone onto television and lasted more than a year on television. And not only that, it has the most internet personalities on it. I mean, you had Damebo, who's the main guy, then you had Bob Jens and Kevin Bruick, and then you had iJustine, who played Passion Fruit, and you had Toby Turner, who not only was a character on Annoying Orange, but he also got a role in being the guy in the middle of the commercials on Cartoon Network. That's the only thing I really give it credit for. Other than that, I kind of expected a little more, I guess, from an Annoying Orange television show. The one thing it definitely is it is a bit annoying. I guess not that annoying from the web series, but you get the idea. I give the crew of this show definitely a lot of credit just for even making this happen. Especially Dambo, because I know he works really hard to make great Annoying Orange content. And sure, it may not make me laugh or smile anymore because obviously I'm outgrowing the Annoying Orange, but I still give him credit because he's working on Annoying Orange every day now of his life. That's really all I gotta say about that. I'm placing it at number 8 because it's not terrible, but at the same time, it's not the best thing. The one thing I will say that I didn't mention in the original video was the only episode I consider to be my favorite episode. That's the episode where Pear tells Orange to get lost and Orange runs away and becomes a tennis ball. That's the only episode of the show that I actually laughed at because it definitely fit the whole aspect of being a television cartoon. It was just too random and there were actually some funny moments in it. But yeah, between all the episodes that focused on the weird time traveling aspects and the movie parodies and jumping from one setting to another setting in another episode, it was just a bit too much and it was definitely out of place on the network. Number 7. Jonas. Or Jonas LA, whatever you want to call it. The time between me making this video and the Jonas video is literally 5 days apart. I literally just talked about this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I literally got off my chest everything I wanted to say about this show. So the only thing I'll say is why it is number 7, and that's because although it was weird to see a Jonas Brothers television show that focused on the Jonas Brothers not being the Jonas Brothers, but rather the Lucas Brothers, and then the weird transition of it being a sitcom in season 1, and then being a weird drama relationship show for season 2 that took place in Los Angeles. It was weird, but I did get entertained by the show. Sometimes what the brothers did was very entertaining. Kevin was very goofy and funny. And I said it before I went into any detail about the show, but I like the Jonas Brothers. Again, I'm not an ultra fan, like I'm not a die-hard fan who has all their albums, but they worked very well on screen. They did very well on Hannah Montana, and it kind of made sense for them to have their own show, seeing that they were at the height of their fame at that point on the Disney Channel. Also, ever since I read about how their show was supposed to be a show about them being cover musicians because they're really secret agents, that sounded a bit more interesting, and I would have liked to have seen that, but instead we got a show of them just being teenagers who are also in a very popular band. Which, now thinking about it, I don't really know how that worked. I mean, they were famous, but they still went to school, and the only person that really flipped out was the girl Macy, who later became Nick's girlfriend, and that's interesting. Well, either way, it was entertaining, but still, it was a bit odd, especially since they lived in a firehouse for some reason. So, number 7 it is. Number 6. The Wacky Adventures of Ronald McDonald. Another weird but strangely entertaining show that just doesn't make sense. Again, it's not even a show. It was more of a home video series. There were only 6 of these, and well, that's pretty much it. I put this at number 6 because I think it's kind of where it deserves to be. Just straight in the middle of this list. It's definitely not horrible, but at the same time, it makes you think. But then again, this is for children. I definitely seem to have some enjoyment watching the one videotape that I had of this, but I also remember me not jumping up and down as much as I probably should have been, like the people making this thought kids should be doing. I really didn't care. I just found it very interesting that they did more stuff with Ronald than just an ordinary McDonald's commercial. Which, by the way, is what they used to do. I don't know what happened. So, yeah, that's really all I could say about that. I gave my complaints. I gave my critiques about it. I also complimented it on a few things. If I didn't mention it in the original, or if I did, I'll just say it now. I liked how they did both live action and then transferred over to the animated world. So the question of where Ronald lives when he's a live action person and not a cartoon, that still makes me think. It's like, was he not living in McDonald land, or was he? Is this a different aspect of it? I think I'm thinking too much of it. Either way, it's at number 6, and it's staying there. Number 5. Wayside. Another show that deserves to just be in the middle of this list because, well, there's not really much you could say about it. It's so forgettable that there really isn't much to say about it. The book was amazing, and the show was pretty good, but it wasn't that great. The show was definitely weird, but it was trying to be weird. That was the whole point of the show. It's to show you that this school is not an ordinary school, and the people that work there and the students just so happen to be completely insane and too much for our main character. Nevertheless, though, it is very funny. The stories were very enjoyable and very creative, but unfortunately, there's not much I can say about it because it's just, it's alright. Not that it's got anything wrong with it, it's just that's how it is. The show was a thing, and well, that's it. There's nothing else I can talk about it. So for that, it's at number 5. Number 4. House of Mouse. Interesting enough, for the last couple of days, ever since I made the House of Mouse video, I had been seeing a bunch more House of Mouse stuff pop up. So that's interesting. I put House of Mouse at number 4 because it's not the best thing I've seen, but it's definitely the coolest thing I've seen. House of Mouse is one of those shows that I think every diehard Disney fan should see, especially if they love crossovers. And again, although not every Disney character has a major role in this series, I think they'll definitely just love the idea that there is a club where all Disney characters come together to enjoy themselves and watch funny Mickey Mouse cartoons. Though there are a bunch of episodes, like I said, that just don't make any sense whatsoever, the idea of Mickey putting together a club and all of his friends running it, that idea is pretty interesting, and I like those episodes where they try to fix something because something goes horribly wrong that night. Those episodes definitely make sense. Like I said before, the show definitely has some episodes that are very questionable. I'm still questioning that super goofy episode. I don't even remember that episode, honestly. Nevertheless, House of Mouse is nothing but cool, and that's all I can say about it. So for that, it's at number 4. Now we're getting to the good stuff. Number 3. Dan Versus. I'm really mad because I wanted this to be number 1 because I really love this show. But unfortunately it can't. The other 2 shows that I haven't mentioned yet kind of outshine it a bit. But Dan Versus is still really awesome. This show and a little of House of Mouse were definitely shows I became obsessed with. Though I think compared with the 2, Dan Versus is the one I was recently obsessed with because I ended up seeing that later on after House of Mouse kind of stopped airing on TV. Dan Versus is nothing but pure creativity and is really funny, and it's enjoyable. I enjoyed seeing this character flip out on the most stupidest things, and to see the outcome of how this revenge plot would end up, it's absolutely hysterical. Again, I wasn't a huge fan of the subplot where Elise was an agent. I didn't really see that going anywhere. I still kind of don't. I don't understand why it was a major point of the show. But that is just like a little nitpick of the show. Dan Versus is absolutely amazing. There's nothing else I can say about Dan Versus, just nothing but pure comedy and absolute fun with this show. I'd like to say it's number 1, but I'm saving that for something more interesting. I'd like to say it's number 2, but that's also for something interesting and cool. So unfortunately, Dan is at number 3, but he's always going to be number 1 in his own world. That was really cheesy. Number 2. 100 Deeds for Eddie McDowell. Yeah, this is the show that beat Dan Versus. Or at least one of them. Dan Versus is a nice little animated show about a guy that rages about everything, so it's enjoyable if you want to see some guy take revenge on anybody or anything. 100 Deeds, however, is completely opposite. I remember the first time I discovered this show going through the Nickelodeon show history, and this show definitely caught my eye because I definitely got a My Name is Earl's vibe to it. And then, finding out about the show, I realized it came out way before My Name is Earl. So yeah, this is kind of like the children's version of My Name is Earl, except different because the kid was turned into a dog. I think the idea was definitely creative, and I'm not the only one that thought that. A lot of people really enjoyed this show, and it's really sad that it got canceled and didn't get a fourth season. Eddie McDowd is still a dog out there somewhere because he's never completed his 100 deeds, though the reasons why it got canceled I can definitely understand. Between the new character introduction, the new voice behind Eddie, and the new theme song, which I personally think was an awful decision, I can definitely see why the show was canceled, and that's a big shame because, again, it's a really interesting and creative show. I definitely think it could have gone somewhere if the show continued going on, but unfortunately, television is television, and there's nothing we can do about that. Nevertheless, though, I think it's a pretty good show, and it deserves more than it got, so for that, it's at number 2, being one of my top 3 favorite shows I've covered on Lost and Found at the moment. And finally, number 1. I'm pretty sure you can guess what number 1 is. It's the only show that I haven't mentioned yet. Incredible Story Studio. I can't praise this show enough. I'm not going to dwell on it that much because I said I wasn't going to go into that much detail, which I don't think really matters now because I'm pretty sure I've contradicted myself multiple times by dwelling into a bunch of other shows. But there's no question, I think Incredible Story Studio deserves to be number 1 because it's the most creative show that I have discovered, not just by doing Lost and Found, but basically of all time. Remember, I talked about this show back in season 1 of The Wild Review, so I had knowledge about this show beforehand, back in 2015. And ever since I discovered it, I just thought that this was a great idea for a show. Having kids write their own stories and then sending them into the studio and possibly getting the chance for their story to be made into a television episode. Why don't we have this on TV now? It's been proven that so many kids are creative and talented by telling stories that this would be a perfect way for them to show their talent. Nickelodeon can pick the idea up and just redo it. I'm all for an Incredible Story Studio reboot, just as long as it's, done right and the way it was when it first aired. So there's really no question why I put it at number 1. I think it's amazing. I think it's a great way for kids to be creative. But overall, I just think it's incredible. And those were my ratings for everything I touched upon in Lost and Found. Do you agree with those ratings? Do you think a certain show should have been at a different spot? Let me know all your thoughts because I would really like to know. Also, have you grown up with any of these shows? Did you happen to come across any of these shows at all in the point of your childhood or manhood or whatever, or just flipping through the channels of children's television? Let me know all your thoughts on how you liked Lost and Found, if you think the shows I covered were pretty good. I know there are a bunch of other shows that are very similar to all these shows that I've talked about. Like there's Fred the Show, which is very underrated and nobody wants to talk about it at all. There are all those Cartoon Network live action shows, which I've technically covered. There are a bunch of shows that are underrated or very forgetful that you don't hear a lot of people talk about. The reason why I didn't talk about those specific ones is because they just kind of didn't come to mind when putting this series together. All the shows I talked about, again, I either grew up with and I realized not many people were discussing it, nor is it that popular on the network that it talked about. It was either that or it was just a show I came across of and did a little research of and found out that it's very underrated and it's not talked about that much. Don't plan on me talking about all those other underrated shows. I really don't plan on doing a sequel to Lost and Found. I'm just going to take a nice little nap from Lost and Found because I've been working on it for a while. With that all said, thank you for watching The Wild Review Lost and Found. I'm The Wild Reviewer, and you just saw me review multiple things. Yep, that's how it goes. Bye! Well, that was fun. Now I can go back to talking about things I missed out on talking about, like the Adventure Time finale, and the Steven Universe season finale, and Doctor Who, and Infinity War, and Wrecked, and Rugrat, and a lot of other things that I missed out on talking about. That's a lot of stuff. And there's even more that I didn't list for some reason. How am I gonna do this? I don't want to make all these different videos. Oh, wait, no. The idea left me. Basically, from April up until this point, I have been working on Resting and Season 6 of The Wild Review. So I've mostly just been gathering stuff together for the 10 shows that I was going to touch upon for Lost and Found. However, a lot of stuff happened in between that time when I was both gone and working on other stuff.
Wild like wildlife.